Hey everybody, welcome to Bound to Truth. This is Chris Lopez. Hope everybody's having a great evening tonight. Hope you had a great work week. I'm tired. I know that for sure. It's a heck of an adventure, very productive. All good. But you know what? You're coming down to work week, you want to have a drink, you want to listen to fine music or something really educational. Think about listening to Bound to Truth. Enjoy the evening. Hear my great voice. And some of the great guests here as well. How you can reach me, is boundtotruth34@gmail.com. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, compliments, insults, any of those sorts of stories you want to share. Also, please subscribe to Bound to Truth on Spotify, Bound to Truth on YouTube, and Bound to Truth on X, as well as on Facebook. Tonight, have a great episode. A very local person here who was actually shared to me from a UFO group named Jacob Zappey. He's got a great book called North Kitsap Mythology. Did I get that right? North Kitsap Mythology, right? No.
No, Northwest Mythology.
Oh, Northwest
It's two books.
Mythology.
Yeah.
Guess what? I failed on my part. I swear, I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
I don't have to memorize it. It's North Kitsap, Northwest. You know what?
Yeah.
I failed, and I think Jacob's going to
Oh,
get
it's all right.
this interview right now. No, joking. Anyways, hey Jacob, just want to say thank you for being on the show. And yeah, man, what I want to start off with before we talk about what got you in this book is talk a little bit about yourself. You know the the myth about you and your
Yeah.
origin story, and that and what got you interested in pursuing this project as well. So, man, take the floor, go for it.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. I appreciate what you're doing, spreading the lore and the love of the strange and supernatural, one that's it's what I hold dear to my heart. And as you mentioned, I actually have two books, Northwest Mythology Volume 1 and Northwest Mythology number 2. What got me started down this path? Well, I grew up in Port Angeles, on the west, on the Olympic Peninsula, and growing up, we had a lot of strange stories out there. Just
Mhm.
all sorts of stuff, a lot of Sasquatch stuff, but also a lot of like ghost stuff, sea serpent stuff, alien stuff, just you name it. You know, uh, we had a lot of like weird, like occult witch stuff out west there. And so growing up, I thought that was like normal stuff.
Right.
And so, I heard these stories, I collected these stories, fell in love with those stories. I joined the Navy. I left Port Angeles. I did a fair share of traveling. I heard a lot of other people's stories. I shared a lot of my stories. And as I shared a lot of these stories, turns out a lot of people uh, didn't have the same experience growing up that
Mhm.
I had, that this was kind of normal stuff. A lot of people had these stories. A lot of people shared these stories around the campfire during my time in service. Turns out that not a lot of people had Sasquatch stories. Not a lot of people had alien encounter stories. Not a lot of people had ghost stories. So, um, creative energy, and I even feel like Sasquatch encounters kind of have an ebb and a flow to this, and call it the creativity cycle. Depending on when your birth is, maybe you have more creative energy at a certain time during the year or not. um Now I'm a school teacher, so during the summer I spend a lot of time outside exploring, hiking, checking out a lot of leads on local myths and stuff that just kind of come to me throughout the year. And I do some investigation work and research work during the school year, but during the summer is really when I hit it hard. And so I was hiking up a favorite hike. And if you're screaming in the background, that's not aliens or Sasquatch, it's my children getting ready
Oh,
for bed.
you disappoint me,
Um,
man. Disappoint
yeah.
me. Oh, God.
So I had a group of hiking friends I go hiking with.
Mhm.
And as we were doing different hikes, out by Port Angeles and Squim area, I kind of tell them the local lore that we had for for that area, being local. And then one summer, this is probably about 2 or 3 years ago, we were hiking up a mountain by Crescent Lake, or we call it Lake Crescent. I don't know how it got turned to Crescent Lake, but now everybody calls it
Yeah.
Crescent Lake.
Honestly, you say you like calling it, was it called Crescent Lake? You said,
We called it Lake Crescent growing
yeah.
up, but now everybody wants to call it Crescent Lake.
And you know what? That's my fault, dude. You know what?
Yeah,
That's my bad. That's what
yeah,
happens when you have a California move to Washington, change everything around, dude.
yeah.
So guilty as charged. Anyways, go ahead.
So with me and you, we were climbing up Storm King, which is a great hike. If you're ever looking for an amazing hike, that's the one. It's not very far. You get a great view of the lake and the mountains. So we climbed to the top, and there's about 20 or 30 tourists up there, which there used to be nobody up there. Now there's all these tourists. So we're hanging out, and the tourists are like, that's prime Sasquatch country. That's what a lot of those people probably were hoping to see.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, hey, does anybody have any Sasquatch stories?
Mm-hmm.
So I shared for about 30. I'm a talker, so I went on for about 30 or 40 minutes about just like a couple local Sasquatch stories and encounters that I had. And like the whole time, the whole audience is just enthralled. So then hiking down the mountain, my buddy's like, hey, Jake, have you ever thought about, writing some of this stuff down so other people can enjoy it? And, at the time I hadn't really thought about it, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna sock that away and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I was, as I mentioned, I'm a middle school teacher, and I was teaching a unit on the Brothers Grimm. I'm sure you've
Oh,
heard of them.
hey, Matt, you talk about Matt Damon and Heath Ledger movie?
Yeah. Yep, the OGs,
And,
man.
and Monica Bellucci in that movie. I think it's right. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah, great
Yeah,
movie. No,
Magic
yeah,
Beans, Magic Beans. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
anyways, yeah, but I'm familiar. Go ahead, bud.
yeah. So I was teaching a unit about that, and the history of that is, basically those two brothers were Germans,
Mhm.
and they fell in love with the local lore there of Bavaria and Germany, and they're just like they were actually pretty they went to college and they had successful businesses, but they left all that just to travel around and collect stories.
Mhm.
And I mean, it's even more interesting than that. We think about these like well-known tales, and a lot of them are rewrites. So as they get the first version down, and I found this in my books. You get this first version down, but as time goes on, you collect more and more pieces. You hear different accounts of the same tale. You gather more, um, I wouldn't call them facts, more information, and these stories grow and grow and grow. And then eventually, you rewrite the stories with the updated information.
Mhm.
And I'll even say, quick plug. I wrote my first book, 2 or 3 years ago, and I made some you I wrote some scripts for a YouTuber, and then I was like, hey, I should try this myself.
Mhm.
So just from that year or 2 years from writing my first book to trying to make my YouTube videos, I had a lot more information that I put into those YouTube videos that didn't get in the book that I had just collected in a year's time. So, that's kind of where this I would like this to go. We were talking the other day, me and you, about where would I like this to go? And I'd love to be, like the Brothers Grimm. You just kind of travel around,
Yeah.
collect stories, and rewrite them as you get more and more information. But yeah, man, it's kind of the lore, the backstory there.
Mhm.
I
Okay.
wrote,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah, no worries. So before I kind of get into have you talked like given like a taste of those stories from your book?
Hmm.
What's like I talked before, like before we did a pre-interview, and and I was searching online for a lot before I even thought about doing the podcast, like a lot of legend, a lot of lore, like what you've done your great work on online. And I had a hard time, like a hard
Yeah.
time. You get like, oh, there's gonna be a haunting ghost adventures thing, in October and Halloween, these events. You
Yeah.
get the Port Gamble, you get about Port Townsend. Those things are very, very surfacely legend areas, but nothing really deep rooted because no one
Yeah.
really talks about that. And when I started this podcast and reaching more on Facebook, I started getting more hits because people tend to talk more when they're kind of behind the scenes, but they don't talk about it because they don't want to get ridiculed. They want to do the stuff, and I'm like, this is kind of taxing, but it got me more interested to even deep further. What would you say? How did you get to do that? What was that journey like for you to put this book together to get that information? I'll share that journey with me.
Are you there?
Oh, there we go. Like, you there? Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that's a interesting conundrum,
Hmm.
if you will. A lot of tales are, local tales shared between locals.
Hmm.
Um, and not that outsiders can't get in, but you have to build up some trust. You have to get to know people and get invited to these things. And like I like, going on those surface level ghost hunts. And sometimes some stuff does happen. You
Hmm.
know, I was talking earlier about the seasons for things. The season for ghost hunting is around Halloween during that October time frame. And I mean, even you know, historically, that's when our ancestors believed that the dead were the closest to our planet. The veil between the two realms is the thinnest.
Right.
That being said, and I'm gonna go. I always go off on tangents. So
Go for
when
it.
when you when you go on these ghost tours, and I like to go on the ghost tours too. They're great. They're fun. If you can do some research and go during an anniversary of an event, okay?
Hmm.
If people died during this time, if there was a battle during this day, if
Hmm.
you can go during that time when those supercharged emotional events happen, it leaves some sort of imprint. And so then, when you go there and it's the anniversary of a battle or an anniversary, the Turner Joy is a good example in Bremerton. Plug for the Turner Joy. Um, they do a ghost tour. So, there was a couple different accidents, and they had like a gun battery blow up. So if you can do the ghost tour during the anniversary of that event, those emotions, those spirits seem to, project more during that time. And
Hmm.
if you can also coincide it with, full moon events, I'd say there's a lot of activity at 3 in the morning. A lot of the ghost tours, though, end at midnight, which I always find interesting. And you'll get some activity at midnight, but you get a lot more activity around that that three
Actually,
in the morning,
actually, you
which
know what? Let me pause you on that second. Sorry, side question
yeah,
here. What is significant regarding like that three in the morning? You're just your theory, thoughts,
yeah.
experience.
I mean, it's again with the seasons, right? So that fall season is traditionally that's the time of death. That's when everything is dying, getting ready for winter, getting ready to get reborn. So
Hmm.
you know traditionally the veil between the living world and the dead world is the thinnest, so spirits can come through. You can communicate with spirits, your ancestor spirits. You can connect better with them. And that 3 in the morning is like a smaller version of that. So that's like the daily cycle of the yearly cycle. So at 3 in the morning seems to be the thinnest, where a lot of creepy stuff happened. When I was in the Navy, I worked night shift a lot. I was in the Navy 8 years. Most of the time, I worked as a military police, and you worked a lot I mean, most of the time night shift. And 3 in the morning, I mean, pretty much no matter where you're at, creepy stuff was going on at 3 in the morning.
Mhm.
And every base has its spots, every ship has its legends. And at first you start out and you're like, oh no, this is a joke.
Mhm.
But after time, I mean, you can't deny it. And did you read my first book? Did you get a chance to read that?
No, I haven't. Actually, this weekend I'm going to be reading it because
Okay.
I had a long, fun weekend,
Yeah.
or week, excuse me, for work. But I did get the book in on Monday, so I'm going to be taking a read on it when I have some downtime tomorrow before I go on my motorcycle ride. Because honestly, when I read through it, I'm probably going to be stupid and start visiting places.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah,
what the book is
yeah.
about. But and I wrote about, and in the book you only want to present material that is good and interesting. So I tell about when I was on night shift on the Stennis. I was on the Stennis, the aircraft carrier, was in Bremerton
Mhm.
for years. And first of all, there a lot of deaths happen on in the Navy for whatever reason, suicides, accidents,
Right.
whatever. So
Mhm.
wherever a prior shipmate had died in that area, uh, weird stuff would happen at 3 in the morning.
Mhm.
You're talking about watertight doors would get slammed, and then you have wheels or levers, and they would get spun by themselves. Nobody around, everybody sleeping. 3 in the morning, radio batteries going down, banging. I mean, a lot of weird stuff, and all around 3 in the morning. And at first you think it's made up. You're like, hey, this stuff's made up, but eventually you experience enough of that, and I mean, not even by yourself. You'll be, usually when you are checking out these spots, you have spots you have to check at night. When you're checking out these spots, you usually have a partner with you.
Mhm.
And I mean, you'll be like, dude, did you hear that? And they'll be like, yeah, I heard that. And you'll hear whispering, and you'll be like, who the heck's whispering up here? And you'll go and try to check it out. Just nobody there.
Mhm.
You know, every I mean, crazy stuff, man. So
Wow.
there's definitely something to that 3 a.m. So,
Mhm.
anyway, the original question, how do you get these stories? So, my buddies were just they're trying to plan out some hikes with me this summer. If you go, and we talked about this a little bit in the
Mhm.
pre-interview,
Mhm.
if you go to these like touristy spots,
Right.
right?
Rum.
Could you have a chance encounter? Sure, absolutely. But you have a more likely chance of having an encounter if you go somewhere more remote where people aren't going on a regular basis. And if you can get some stories from locals, I was just reading an interesting book. I'm going to give this book a plug too. So I read
Please.
all the time,
Yeah, go
read
for it.
voraciously. So my wife actually just got me this book. So it's the United States of cryptids,
Oh, cool.
and
Cool, cool, cool.
this guy, similar concept to what I do. Obviously, he's probably a little bit bigger, but
Mhm.
he put into words something that I found too. So you can get information from the library. That's a great source. If you go to a historical place that's had Sasquatch encounters, or a historical place of ghost encounters or dragon encounters, whatever encounters, you're going to have a higher likelihood. But the best place, this book mentions it, I found, you go to gas stations, you go to dive diners,
Mhm.
and or dive bars, and you try to make some connections with locals in the area,
Right.
and they will tell you where strange stuff is happening.
Wow.
And if there's not strange stuff, move on to the next dive bar. And and really, I talk about, like, in my books, I talk about like coincidences a lot, and I call it pulling a thread. And it really is like like one thing leads to another, and it's almost like there's some sort of like something divine or something that you can't see that leads you to this stuff.
Mhm. Okay, wow. Oh my goodness. But so basically it's just pretty much going out there in the area
Yes.
we're at and so forth. And I actually it's funny, and I'll talk a little more towards the end with this gentleman I'm actually doing a motorcycle ride tomorrow with. We're gonna be going to Port Townsend. I'm sure you know all about Port Townsend,
Yeah.
and so forth. And he's saying here, especially in Kitsap, it's a really big hotbed for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And even just me like living in Hansville and even being by the tribe, and I've talked to some, I've had, where I do with my job, I see a lot of clients and talk to some even tribal members, some one from Squamish about like Bigfoot, and he's just saying, yeah, there's big stuff about that, it's and he kind of said the same thing. You have to really kind of get in the tribe and so forth. And it is a hotbed. Actually, I have a quick little story to share with you. This is gonna be interesting.
Hmm.
Kind of want to get your thoughts of this one. This may not be anything, okay? So a few years back, my ex-spouse, so it was my ex brother-in-law and I and her. We're hanging out, having a few drinks, chilling out, just chilling, just doing our thing on the weekend here at my place. And of course, I go to bed around 11 because I'm just old guy, and he and so forth. So did he. And then she's a night owl, and it was about 2 to 3 a.m. She was watching TV. She hears a knock on the door, and it was a like a young girl saying, "Hello,
Hmm.
hello, is anybody there? Hello, can you let me in?" And she was just freaking out, and they kept going, "Hello, hello, can you let me in? Please, can you help me, please?" And she told me this the next morning. I was like, "Well, did it sound panicky? What was going on?" Obviously, nothing happened. We would have woke up. I would have, I'm sure she would have got me, but she didn't. She was so freaked out by it because of this person was asking, supposedly a person was asking help, but it was such a calm demeanor, and
Hmm.
eventually went away. And but it freaked her out so much that she's like, I was frozen shut. I could not do anything about it. Have you heard anything like that, or do you think it could be people in the woods here? Because I'm in Hansville, so there's not like a bunch. I don't know how many people live out in the woods, but I mean, that was kind of freaky.
Yeah, and there's a lot of it could have just been a spirit, like, if do you know the history of your house?
I do not, but I did meet with somebody who talked about a woman in white with black hair. That's actually down the road. And she's not sure if it's malevolent or benevolent. It's just there. And so I haven't had that luxury of having that experience, but could have been that lady. I'm not sure. She's like pretty much across the street where I'm at in Shorewoods. But I thought that was really, really interesting. But just to kind of give an example of what that was, all I know is that she says something, it just wasn't right. Like,
Yeah, and
yeah.
well, and there's a lot of like local lore, tribal lore about like spirits or evil spirits that try to lead people into the woods, and basically get them lost, and they die or what for whatever reason. So, there's kind of well-known local lore that if you hear, and usually it's children voices calling you into the woods, don't follow them. So,
Right, right.
especially at night. I always have a theory that when you're scared, these beings or whatever kind of can draw energy, and especially like malevolent beings or evil beings. The more scared you are, kind of the more power they get. They kind of like feed off of that. Um, but yeah, as far as Kidsap too, you know, um, there's this kind of lore about like the peninsula shapes. And
Mm,
so as you
okay.
are on a peninsula, wherever uh two elements meet, so
Hmm.
you have like land and water meeting on three sides. So it there's a lot of like transitional power there. And so like a lot more strange stuff will happen. So that's why like a lot of times, holy sites from, all ancestors are built on hilltops or whatever, because it's the it's the earth meeting the air. And then if, waterfalls are another pretty like sacred site kind of universally, because it's water meeting the sky, meeting the earth. And so, a lot of lore goes with connections there. So if you think about that kind of ancestral knowledge,
Mm,
it makes sense that Kidsap would be a powerful place. As far as why Sasquatch specifically comes to Kidsap, and I still think Sasquatch comes here on a regular basis. I kind of think Sasquatch, I have mixed feelings about them. If they're a spiritual animal,
right,
purely spiritual realm, or all natural, or a combination of both.
right,
But you think Sasquatch has to eat something, right?
right.
Sasquatch has to eat something. So a likely food source in our area is probably salmon. Uh Kidsap Peninsula has a lot of salmon streams in a short area. And it's still, a lot of salmon, you can catch them going up the streams at night, even though, as humans, we're not supposed to fish at night. But if you
Right.
go to a stream at night, you can hear them swimming in the shallows, swimming up there. So if you're let's say 500-600 pound bipedal creature that's nocturnal, that needs a substantial amount of food, it would make sense that they would come to Kidsap during salmon spawning time, which
Mm,
is spring, fall. I mean, really, we have runs almost all year. So, the if they had the natural rhythm of the land,
mhm.
uh, Kitsap County, and our rivers aren't that big. They're medium-sized rivers, so they could potentially come here and kind of work their way up and down the peninsula as the salmon spawn, and then go back to the deeper recesses. And I'd assume they come from the Olympic Peninsula, collect salmon here, and then go back. And Sasquatch supposedly has a pretty big range. I've heard hundreds of miles ish. They'll roam for the different seasonal foods. So that's my theory on why Kitsap is a hotbed. There's a lot of historical Sasquatch sightings, encounters
Mhm.
in the area, both from the tribe and early pioneers, and continues to this day. And at least until the area is so developed, there's no more trees for them to hide in.
Yeah, and it's funny. When I was talking those pictures I sent you from Randy Bauer, the one from Minnesota, and we were talking about that. And he was told that like, well, Sasquatch can't really survive because, depending on the area, the food source and so forth. And his belief, and it's interesting because he testifies that he has seen him walk through portals and everything like that. And he was he has got a lot of conviction. He's got a pretty sizable hotbed. Like I told you, he's been on a few TV shows. He's been in a book, and he says, "Well, we don't know about its biology because we never captured it, right?"
Yeah,
And I'm like, well, that's true. We don't know. I mean, how many us as humans, you've seen actors and people go on very low food supply, right?
yeah,
Dieting or whatever like that. And our bodies, I had a teacher back in high school saying our body fights hard to live and survive.
yeah,
So it's like if we can do those things, how much more can this animal, because we don't know its genetics. Maybe
yeah,
maybe there's a seasonal part genetically where it stores like kind of like maybe a
yeah,
bear where it eats all its fat, it hibernates and does that. I'm not saying Sasquatch does, but I'm wondering if that as well. And I know when people say, "Well, we never seen a body, never seen like this," I'm like, number one, how do we not know? Because conspiracy theory, people hide stuff. We don't have no
yeah,
idea, what's going on. Two, how I tell people too is like, well, how many times you run across especially here in Washington, we know bears are out there, we know deers out there, we know coyotes are out there, but how many times you run across a carcass?
mhm,
Right. So just because we know it's we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. type of thing. And I mean, and like before, like example with gorillas, they weren't really discovered or been more of a discovery till like late 1800s, early 1900s,
Yeah,
because they like the silverbacks, right? Until someone
yeah,
shot one and then
yeah.
brought it back, or like the Cybercore Museum. So that's kind of my thought into that whole Sasquatch theory. Yeah.
Yeah, and a valid point at the very least, Sasquatch is, I would say, semi-intelligent on the low end. On
Okay.
the high end, they're a supernatural being that has, extra uh powers that we can't even comprehend.
Hmm.
So you assume that the reality is somewhere in that middle ground, right?
Right.
So if they're, a primitive society, let's say they're Neanderthal like or caveman like, uh that is proven that Neanderthals and cavemen, they didn't leave their dead out. They went and buried their dead in caves, and they found, graves of Neanderthal bones in these caves, highly ornate burial rites. So Sasquatch isn't going to leave their dead just laying around.
Hmm.
And on top of that, they obviously don't want to be found, right? So
Right.
if your uncle died, you're not going to leave your uncle there for, somebody to discover. You're going to give him burial rites. And a common theory is, and I'd say it's pretty well supported even with, my research, Sasquatch probably lives in some sort of cave system. So
Okay.
they're going to be burying their dead in these caves.
Hmm.
And people are like, well, we'd still find the bones in caves, but Native American lore, kind of just colonial lore, well-known lore. When I was talking in the pre-interview, Scandinavian lore
Hmm.
mentions, okay, trolls, Sasquatch, similar beings, they live in these cave dwellings. Well, why don't we find their cave dwellings? Well, they're, creatures that have immense strength and ability. So you think about how big of a stone could, two or three male Sasquatches roll,
Hmm.
right? So when you're in these caves, okay, well, that's a giant boulder.
Hmm.
Yeah, for us, that's immovable. But if you had two or three Sasquatches put their back into it, they could wheel that right away, open up a whole nother, chambers, whatever, uh, areas that we couldn't access. And you said you were going to Port Townsend. And I know you only got the first book. In the second book,
Hmm.
I write about a spot called Tamawanos Rock. Have you heard of that?
What's it called again?
Tamawanos Rock. It's
Camelot Rock. I've not heard of it. Go for it.
okay, so it's on your way. It's like right outside Chimacum
Okay.
when you're going towards Port Townsend.
Hmm.
Um, it's I would Google it when you get done here. It's worth the stop.
Okay.
So it is kind of hard to find. It's not well marked, but it's basically this weird rock where Native Americans, it was like a place of power for the local tribes, a
Hmm.
lot of tribal lore in there, but there's also a lot of strange caves back in there. And again, none of these trails are marked. If you need some help finding it later, let me know. But
Okay.
online, it'll give you directions. But there is weird caves. If you hike up behind there, there's weird caves. People all the time have Sasquatch encounters there. So on your way to Port Townsend, I'd highly recommend
Yeah.
stopping and checking that out. You sent me some pictures of those
Yes.
trees that Sasquatch supposedly uses to mark their territory. I found some ones out there that were, you know, huge tree-like structures.
Hmm.
I try in my second book, I took some pictures of them. It doesn't do them justice though.
Hmm.
When you're taking pictures of these, it people are like, oh well, even those pictures you sent me, I was like, well, I don't know, maybe a person could have done that. And I'm sure the ones that I took pictures of in my book, kind of the same thing. But I mean, there was big structures like that in the middle of nowhere. And on a side note too, Chris, if you want to meet Sasquatch, you have to go away from the like common trails.
Right. Oh, I, I,
I
I, I 100% agree with that. I done that when I went to Port Gamble for a bit, and I found some. And I should send. You know what? I should send these photos this week. I don't know why I didn't because I thought, I'm an amateur. But you know what? I should send them to you. The ones that are off trails, that
Mhm.
maybe you can get some light. You might say, that's not really nothing, or that's interesting, because I did go off trails in Port Gamble because I'm an idiot. Uh,
Yep. Well, it's easy to
yeah.
get lost too out there, man.
Oh,
That's
it's I'll tell you this, man, and I know you can totally relate with this, is when I was going up trails, especially up hills parts,
mhm.
and that were marked off in Port Gamble. And it's funny how you think when you look on a map, how, oh, it's so small. Dude, it's not small.
Yeah.
We're small. And it's funny how the sky gets dark because of all the forestry.
Yeah.
Because when you're off trail and you're going up those hills, I noticed and I was like, geez, dude, this is dark. This is like
Yeah.
dark forest.
And it
And
all looks the
and
same too. You're like, man,
yeah,
this
you're just like, where did the sun go? Because of all
yeah.
the vegetation, and everything. And I went up pretty high, and I was like, okay, this is stupid and everything. And of course, I have my hunter knives with me just for protection from any wild animal. It ain't gonna stop Sasquatch. I'm just like, okay, please don't hurt me. I'm just chilling. I'm just saying hello. It's all good. But I thought that was interesting, just to get the feeling of what you were talking about. I'll have to send those photos this weekend. But yeah, it is. I agree with you. Going back to the point, it has to be off trail because
Yeah.
why would they be near that trail per se? I mean, I'm not saying people haven't experienced those at times,
Yes.
but I think it's more like if you're going in their territory, you're definitely going to have a more of an experience, I think, um, or maybe not. I have no idea. Now, with in your book, have you talked about? Okay, let's shoot this. Have in your book, have you talked about like your experience being in certain areas, or just more about the legends, a little bit of both? Kind of, can you elaborate a little bit?
Yes. And so like you said, historical areas where there's been historical encounters
Mm,
definitely enhances your chances. Port Gamble does have historical Sasquatch encounters in that forest. And the tribe used to their village used to be where the Port Gamble town is now. There's
okay.
a whole stat history, and I kind of talk about it in my book. Um, when you go on that Port Gamble tour, they I don't know if they're purposely trying to hide all the stuff that happened, but a lot of Sasquatch encounters there. A lot of when I went on the Port Gamble kind of like touristy thing, a lot of areas are off limits when you go on that.
Actually,
Um,
actually, before you continue, I agree because when I went off trail, I came across some areas that were considered off limits that were
yes,
marked, and I'm talking about uphill. This is totally off trail, marked
yes,
uphill. I crossed it because I'm like, screw it, I don't care. I'll just run down here and roll, duck and roll. I got my long hair to keep me safe down there. But no, I totally agree because I saw quite a bit of markers the more I was going off. There were some marked areas. I'm like, why? But
yeah.
anyways, sorry, but yeah, I'm just agreeing what you're saying. But go ahead.
Yeah, I mean 100%. And I mean, in my book, I write about Gold Mountain too, and there's a lot of areas in Gold Mountain that are off limits for questionable reasons. Supposedly, it's to protect the reservoir up there,
Mhm.
but they allow logging. So if you're going to allow logging in certain areas, how is that less polluting than some people hiking? And
Yeah.
then up there in the watershed on the Gold Mountain, they are strict and they have a police force that purposely keeps you out of these areas that will patrol, trespass you. I mean, they don't joke around. So I do a lot of speculating in my book about what they're protecting, but me and you talked in the pre-interview too, and I suspect the government probably knows a lot more about Sasquatch than what we know.
So,
And
sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I kind of like mentioned that to you, like, I see, and that it's local lore out there in Port Angeles. We'd always say, they're Sasquatch and the government kind of have a deal.
Mhm.
And it's almost like this this land is like the reservation for Sasquatch.
Mhm.
And if they stay on this area, humans won't really mess with them. And if we stay on our area, they won't really mess with us.
Mhm.
But it's when you go to these areas that are not there, and I mentioned this too. I don't know if Sasquatch is out to hurt people. I kind of feel like Sasquatch is not necessarily out to get people, but a lot of people do go missing. So, if you stay in this safe area, you are relatively safe. If you go into these unsafe areas where Sasquatch might be, you're kind of rolling the dice with
Right.
what will happen. You got me off on another tangent though, with the poor gamble, Chris. With the
Yeah,
poor
yeah,
gamble.
go and you know what? I apologize. That's
Oh, it's okay.
that part of me that just does that because I'm like
Yeah,
squirrel. But anyways, go
I
ahead.
know. I love it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
with the poor gamble. So when I went on that tour, they let you into certain buildings in certain parts.
Mhm.
What some of my friends' parents used to be the caretakers there of Port Gamble in the 80s. And
Mhm.
they mentioned there's like a whole nother like catacomb underground tunnel level to that town. And so, you're
Really?
you're thinking about like Sasquatch lore and all this lore, there's always caves. Like caves always come up whenever you're looking at it. And so, I don't know if the caverns go all the way into the forest or not, but those areas that were fenced off or don't trespass or whatever, maybe there is a cave entrance around there that they don't want people stumbling upon. But
Right.
and Port Gamble's an interesting place, man. It has a lot of interesting history, not just with Sasquatch, but just in general. But it's crazy. And like I said, on your bike ride tomorrow, your motorcycle ride, check out that Tamawanos Rock. That is a crazy place, and there is caves. Um, the one entrance I found was a really tight fit, and I'm
Mhm.
you know I'm a pretty big guy, so I couldn't really fit in there. I'd bring a headlamp,
Mhm.
and I mean, I do exploring too by myself sometimes. So when I found that cave entrance, I was by myself, and I'd have to crawl in there. So I wasn't about that. But
No, man.
uh,
Is that where the kind of curiosity kind of stops saying, "All right, that's the line. Yeah, I'm gonna put a pause on this right here." You know.
yeah, it's it's hard because you have an interest,
Mm.
but some of the things might not be safe. And even making the YouTube videos, I get a lot of comments because I will do some mild like trespassing in government areas you're not supposed to be and stuff. And I can't get arrested. I'm a teacher, so I have to be really cautious about that. But also, people are like, well, what if you just disappear one day? So I always think about that. What if I climb? And I always joke around, even at my talk at the museum. I said, if if I end up missing and they find me and they say a bear killed me, know that it was Sasquatch. Like it
Well,
was,
it's funny that happened to some dude in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I know people are like, "Oh, it's a UFO abduction," but he was a very professional hiker, right? And he would go miles and miles and miles. He's just that kind of pro, and he went to this cave. I don't know if it looked like an M or whatever, but he didn't feel right about it, and people kind of called him out. He's like, "I'm gonna do it again," but he ended up missing.
yeah,
He ended up missing, and and I'm sure I think we talked about this, and forgive me if now you have a better memory than I do because I like I said I forget 5 minutes later. I'm like Finding Dory, Dory from the
yeah,
movie. David Paulides. I'm sure you've heard of him, of
yeah,
course, right? And people, and it's interesting because I know David Paulides talks about that, and there's a lot of theories behind is it Sasquatch, is it something in the woods? It can be a mixture of both. I mean, I'm sure like you say, wrote a lot about the mythology out here. I remember one event where he talked about how there was a missing 3 or 4 year old um in the woods, and they couldn't find him until he was up. I think it was 3,000 feet up of a mountain,
Oh,
and face down, clothes folded. And when they were searching for this boy, even the professional hikers, I think it was like an ex-military Navy SEAL or whatever, said, "I barely made this climb. There's no way this kid did this on its own."
yeah.
And so that was one of those many theories. But yeah, it's interesting. Do you think that in these forests, and when I did hiking in Port Gamble, right? And I'm kind of like, okay, maybe I'll see some Sasquatch signs or whatever, just kind of like doing my own amateur exploring. One of the things I noticed is that I was getting kind of distracted and tired. And now when I say distracted and tired, like I know what it feels like to be tired. I used to train a gym, do bodybuilding, and all that stuff. This was something different. It was something where it's like I couldn't really focus. And this was more off the trail than on the trail.
Hmm.
On the trail was different. Off the trail, going more deeper, it just got kind of weirder and weirder. And you think that kind of ties into that maybe because of like Native American lore, because we were talking about when you made the point regarding how the peninsula and how it's made out to be. I mean, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there there is a lot of stories about, I mean, first of all, just going off trail is super hard. I mean, it
Mhm.
is exhausting work.
Oh
You
yeah,
know, you're talking about walking on a trail for 10 miles. If you're off trail, you might be able to do 2 miles is about the equivalent.
and that's pretty much what I did is 2-3 miles, and that was
Yeah.
oh, yeah,
But I mean, as far as like supernatural stuff, I mean, you think about legends of like, Rip Van Winkle and stuff, and there's a lot of lore that people go into the woods and just kind of fall asleep and wake up and have kind of these like supernatural experiences. So, nature is a different environment than what modern day humans are used to.
right,
So, at one point in time, maybe we were used to, if you want to call it the magic or the energy of that place.
right,
At one point, we were probably adapted to that. But now, being modern humans, I'd say most modern humans, when you go off trail and you go to these places, we're not used to that energy. And
right,
everything is very like surreal, and I mean there's a lot of like strange stuff, man, when you get in deep and there's nobody's been there for a long time. I mean, you are well aware that, hey, that supernatural things could happen there. And I always hypothesize in my book, and I say, you don't really start to have strange experiences until you're, a good, it's hard to say. I'd say you need to be at least several miles since a trail or a well-known spot. And some trails, I would say you could take some trails, but they have to be not very well used to have these strange experiences. And I mean, there is something to it. You think about, spirit quest for Native Americans. They didn't always use psychedelic drugs to have these experiences. Some of them were just going into the woods and hiking for days at a time in these strange places, and they'd have visions and encounters and all this stuff. And it's, you hike to these places and there's a resonance there that you can feel.
right,
And it's like the hairs on the back of your neck. And I mean, it's that same way with like the ghost stuff that I was telling you about. You like have a feel, and I don't know if some people are more sensitive. Some people are like, oh, you have to be more sensitive or whatever. I just think you can become more attuned to it.
right,
So, we're a lot of times bombarded by, media, video games, all this stuff. So we're not used to listening to our bodies. But when you come to a place that has this power and you're attuned to it, like you said, you can feel it.
right.
And you'll start to have these strange coincidences. And like I said, man, sometimes these coincidences will be so strange one after another that don't seem to be connected at all.
Right.
And you know, something me and you talked about tonight, maybe somebody will bring up to me, tomorrow or the next week, and I'll be like, man,
Right.
that's weird.
Yeah.
This is like 5 times
Hmm.
that, in a month or whatever that somebody's mentioned this to me.
Right.
And it'll just kind of pull me to that place. Maybe it's poor gamble. Maybe I need to go in the woods and poor gamble.
And,
But
and by the way, I'm in. By the
yeah,
way, okay, I'm in. You know what? How many kids you have?
I have 4 that live with me now, but
You know what? You
only
bring you
the
bring your wife and your kids. They can play with the chickens and my cats and guinea pigs. And you know how to go out to Port Gam, and
yeah.
that's the deal. I'm telling you, man. It's only like 20 minutes away from me. So,
Yeah, and I've been up there in those woods a few times. I mean, they are weird woods, and like I said too, they are, traditionally sacred woods to the tribe. So I mean, there is a lot of Sasquatch lore in history. They were actually trying to log all those trees, and a bunch of people got together and bought a bunch of the land and saved that getting all logged. So
right.
uh, it's a pretty good story. But I want to, about that weird feeling.
Yeah.
So, uh, I think I wrote about it in my second book. One of the YouTubers I had been writing scripts for, commissioned me to go and check out by Mount St. Helens. He's from that area, and he's like, Jake, there's a bunch of weird Sasquatch stuff out here. And it's like, well, really, I only do like Olympic Kitsap Peninsula stuff. He's like, I'll pay you $300 to check it out for gas. And he's like, and I'll buy your scripts from you. And I'm like, all right, man, cool. Let's go. So I didn't really have much expectation to discover anything because I don't really know that area.
Right. Out of your
But
element type of thing. Yeah.
yeah, out of my element. But me and my buddy go there, and we start having these like strange run-ins with locals telling us about these places to check out. We start finding weird marks on trees. We start, finding just a lot of weird Sasquatch stuff.
Okay.
And so my buddy's like, because he saw how I was doing it, right? I was being observant, because part of this too is being observant of your surroundings, right? Being attuned to your surroundings, being attuned to your body. And so he kind of saw how I did it a couple times where I'm like, dude, that doesn't look right. And like, I kind of have a weird feeling as we're like just driving down these random back roads by Mount St. Helens, which is huge. That's a huge area.
Mm,
So it's like finding a needle in a haystack.
mm.
But, a couple times I'm like, that doesn't look right. I'm having a weird feeling, like, stop. And so I had like 3 or 4, and we found, you know, weird scratches in the trees that were super high up, like higher than what the local bears could have done.
Mhm.
We found a weird structure, like the stick structure, like from those videos, but this one actually was tied with rope. And
Really?
that was just like a random feeling too. And I was like, dude, something's weird right here. Like, stop right here. So we
Mm.
stop and we get out, and right off the road is like a weird structure tied with rope. Now, I don't know if it was Sasquatch or not, but something triggered me where I'm like, this is a weird area. You need to stop.
Hey,
And
as
then
long as it's not the Blair Witch, dude. Okay.
yeah, I don't know what it was, but
Right.
so my buddy's like, he's like, so how do you know when to stop? And I explained to him that weird feeling. I was like, you just get a weird feeling, like a tingling on the back of your neck, like
Mm.
your hair standing up. And so then he was driving, and he's like 2 seconds later, like, he's like, dude, I'm getting a weird feeling right now. And I'm like, bro, shut up. You're making this up. And he's like, no, I'm not. I swear to God, we have to turn down this road.
Yeah.
Just random log road, middle of, the Guilford Pinoche National Forest, which is like just hundreds of miles. We turn down this log road. We're driving, and all these like 4 or 5 saplings, like probably, 30 to 50 feet saplings, are just snapped over the road
Right.
of this dirt road, random dirt road.
Mm.
And I'm like, dude, this is weird as hell. And he's like, all the other trees are fine except for, these 4 or 5 saplings snapped over the road so you couldn't drive on. And I'm like, we have to get out and check this out.
Mhm.
And so we get out, we climb up on the embankment, and no shit, Chris, and everybody's like, well, you were up there looking for Sasquatch. Why didn't you have a casting kit? But all those trees, this huge bare footprints, like when I say bare, they're like humanoid footprints,
Right.
18 feet long, planted in the soil, and you could see where something, I'd assume Sasquatch, had planted its feet and pushed these trees over the road. And my, just random. This was a random feeling my friend had, and we're like, what the hell, dude? So we thought about trying to go back to town and getting a casting kit, but it's like, are these prints going to be here? Are we going to be able to find this again?
Right.
So then we follow the tracks up the hill. You could see kind of how they went up the hill, and we found some like giant like handprints, but like the thumb was like way down here. Like it was not like, it looked like a gorilla hand, like a giant one though.
Right.
And you can see where, because there was a steep embankment where
Right.
something had clawed its way up that hill. And so we followed it up, and they looked pretty fresh too. My friend's like, dude, are we gonna follow these? I'm like, yeah, we're gonna follow these.
Heck yeah.
I know. So we got to like a moss clearing, this clearing in the trees, and then it was just moss, and we couldn't pick up the trail. But I mean, you think about how crazy it is that he was like, we were just talking about that, and then he had that feeling.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about like being in tune with this stuff. So I mean, I'll kind of do an abridged. So I talk about that in my second book.
Mhm.
But so we can continue on. So we're like, hey, let's go pitch camp down the road from this area. So we pitch camp down there, and I mean right at dusk. And there's a lot of Sasquatch activity at dusk and at dawn. And that's kind of like those two, it's almost like a a 3 a.m. type thing. A lot of animals are active then because it's like the transition from the day creatures to the nocturnal creatures.
Mhm.
So we set up camp, and we're eating dinner and it's starting to get dark. This is like June, late June. And we hear and I talked to you about Sasquatch sounds before. This was like the sound of, I equate to two Sasquatches trying to locate each other.
Mhm.
So it's like a guttural. I mean, I'm gonna just try to do it. I don't know if this is gonna hurt people's
Do
ear,
it.
but it's
Go
like
for it. Go for it.
it's like like it's kind of sounds like a coyote,
Yeah.
but more vocal cords. So have you ever heard coyotes at night?
No, well, yeah, where I'm at, absolutely. But I've heard exactly what you're talking about on certain videos and everything. It's a very fast grottal, but language
Yes.
type of
And
sound.
you can
Yeah,
hear,
yeah,
yes, you can kind of like hear almost, they're like, blah, 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 blah,
yeah.
blah, blah, blah.
And
And
it's kind of
like,
like it's like a lower high pitch at times. It's really
yeah,
interesting. It's like, but it's like it sounds languishy, but something that's really like it's like another country I haven't discovered.
yes.
Yeah,
But I mean, it was more like guttural, like, I don't know. It sounded like they were trying to say something, but not in words that we would recognize.
right.
But anyways, we were not camped too far from those trees,
Mhm.
and we were kind of more on a main road. Like but it was coming from right where those trees were pushed over. And so we heard that one and then another one answer. And they were just sitting there chirping back and forth for a while. And we're like eating dinner. And we're like, hey, should we go check this out? But we were pretty tired. And
Right.
we're like, well, let's see how this goes at nighttime. We don't want to like leave our dinner, go wander around. We had just pitched camp, and we're like, we'll see how this progresses. And as it gets darker and darker, they kind of like are going farther and farther away.
Mhm.
So we're like, all right, there's a lookout that looks out over Mount St. Helens, up the road within walking distance of our camp. And so we're like, well, let's go check out this lookout. And this is a dirt road, but during that time, not a lot of cars had been go on there. I think we saw like 2 cars all day, and this is like more of a main road.
Mm-hmm.
So we're walking, and as we're walking, again, this is about being like aware to your surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
Something to the right catches my eye as we're walking up this slope. And it's like, I don't know what it is. It's like something metallic and weird because it's pretty dark now. It's like 7, 8 o'clock. It's to that time where it's not pitch black, but it's getting pitch black. And I'm like, hey guys, I see something down here.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, what is it? I'm like, I don't know. It looks like mangled metal or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, all right, well, let's go check it out. We don't know what's down there. Again, going off trail, so we go down off trail, and it's not very far. Maybe a tenth of a mile. We reach another log road that was below the log road we were on. And what caught my eye was this metal gate, and this metal gate had just been mangled. And I put some pictures of it in my second book, but again, it's getting photography of this is so hard. But
Right.
the metals were bent just
Uh-oh. You still there? Did I lose
and
you? Oh,
both
sorry.
sides of huh?
Oh, sorry. I had a pause for a moment because the U.S. government's trying to infiltrate our podcast. Sorry,
Of course they are. They know I'm on here. They're spying on. They know I
You mentioned
trespass.
the gate getting bent, and they're like, "No,
Yeah,
dude. Hey, it didn't go past DARPA. You can't talk about that."
yeah,
Anyways, go ahead. Go
yeah.
ahead.
They know
Yeah.
I've been trespassing. They know I'm
Right,
out.
right. Anyways.
But I mean, this gate had just been mangled in such a way, and we had another friend with us too that was not a believer at all.
Right.
And he's like, "Oh, well, maybe somebody ran into this gate." And I was like, "Bro, if somebody ran into this gate, all the bars would be broken in one way."
Right.
I'm like,
Bent, and
"Something
yeah, exactly.
something has pulled this gate apart."
Oh,
And
geez.
so even he had to admit, he's like, "Man, this is some weird stuff." So we took some pictures of the gate, talked about what we are supposed to do, and it's getting pretty dark now. And we're like, kind of came to the conclusion, hey, whatever tore apart this gate, we probably want to get out of here before it gets pitch black and go, back up to the main road. So we cut back to the forest, back to the main road, continued to the lookout point.
Mhm.
Now, at the lookout point, at this point, I will say both my friends were carrying guns.
Okay.
And the whole time I was upset with them because they knew we were coming up there to look for Sasquatch.
Right.
And there's a lot of stuff about intent where, if Sasquatch is a spiritual being, it, he's going to sense your intent, or it's going to sense your intent. If you have the intent to shoot Sasquatch or harm Sasquatch, you probably aren't going to see Sasquatch.
You know what?
Ne-
I'll tell you this. It's funny you brought that up. When I sent those pictures from Randy,
uh,
he said the same freaking thing.
yeah,
Said he says it's all about intent. If your intent's not there with the right reasons, they're not going to come.
yep,
And he said eventually he did bring some small weapons with them, but his intent was like, I'm not here to harm you.
yeah,
I'm here to protect myself from other like bears and so forth. But he was very, very passionate about sharing about intent. So it's funny
yeah,
you brought that up. I think that people are like, well, how does it know what your intent is?
yes,
Well, listen, when like I have cats, right? I have animals and so forth. When they do something bad, they know my intent. I'm not happy. Guess what
yep,
they do? They run off, right?
yep,
They could feel it. No different. I mean, we have intent. You can
yep,
see somebody walking into a room. You can see, like for me, what I do with my job, I can tell by looking at somebody, and because that's what I do for my job is, I deal with people and talk to people all the time. It's all about that body language and their look. You can feel it, man. So it's like,
yep.
how can not Sasquatch do the same thing, right?
Well, and I have another theory too, because some people are like, oh no, that well, how could he sense your spirit. And you're right, animals can, and to me that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I have another rebuttal, and that's, you know, Sasquatch is the hide and seek champion.
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah, that's a
let's say
great one.
even if they can't sense your intent, they have enhanced smelling, so they might be able to smell the gunpowder, but also they have enhanced night vision, so they could probably see the guns. And
Right.
they know what guns are. So, they're hiding in the bushes, checking you out, and if they see a gun, they're not going to present themselves to be shot. Like, why would they do that? And there
Right.
is historical accounts of Sasquatch being shot. So, you go back 100 years, maybe they would present when humans have guns, but they're not doing it anymore for whatever reason. If they sense your intent or they see your gun. So, anyways,
Yeah.
I salty to with my friends because I was like, this is why we're not seeing Sasquatch, because you guys have guns.
Right.
And they're like, oh, shut up, Jake, blah 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 blah. So, we
They,
get
they, they,
get
they didn't they didn't say like, oh, Sasquatch is not American. What's going on?
well, there were
No, amendment, kill the guns. Anyway, sorry.
yeah. I mean, Sasquatch is a scary thing, and I feel them, right? Like a gun makes you feel safe. I don't know if a gun will actually hurt Sasquatch, because there's a lot of stories of people shooting Sasquatch that doesn't seem to really affect it. And you even think about shooting a grizzly bear, right? Like, assume Sasquatch is about the size of a grizzly. I mean, you have to have some serious fire to, or
Oh
get
yeah.
really lucky with, to stop.
Firepower and a good shot. I mean,
Yes.
firepower and a good shot. I mean, you can't shoot a grizzly bear with the freaking pistol. I mean,
Yeah.
it's going to make it tickle and piss it off.
Yeah. And so, it's like, I get it. It makes you feel safe. I don't know, if it's gonna help or whatever, but you know, it made them feel safe. It got them out exploring with me. And a lot of times now they don't bring guns because of that. They got a lot of flack. Did you watch my videos?
I watched a few of them. They're really good. Yeah, but
So I
which
mean,
video?
I made a video about this, and a lot of people weren't happy with my friends for bringing guns. And one of my friends was like, "What you said?" He's like, "Well, we need to shoot Sasquatch so we can prove Sasquatch is real." And I'm like, people were not happy about that. But anyway, so we hiked to this lookout,
Mhm.
and this is probably the strangest UFO encounter I have too. And I know that a lot of times Sasquatch and UFO kind of goes hand in hand, and I didn't get the connection. So I had seen some like weird things in the sky before, but I hadn't had a Sasquatch encounter and then a UFO encounter the same day. So we hiked to this lookout, and we're just sitting there being quiet, like observing the surroundings, right? Overlooking Mount St. Helens. You can see Mount St. Helens in the background. Even though it's dark, there's some moon, so you can see the light.
Right.
And one of my buddies points out, and it's just like a white light, like a plane light. He's like,
Right.
dude, check out that light. And you just see this thing just zipping across the sky, side to side, up and down, all. Oh, I mean, you're talking about going, I don't even know how fast. I was in the Navy and I saw planes going fast, and those
Right.
planes go hundreds of miles. This was going way faster, just hundreds of miles in the air, hundreds of miles to the right, hundreds of in seconds. You just watch it zip around the sky for like 30, 40 minutes. We watched this, Chris. And
Wow.
then all of a sudden it just zips behind the mountain, and then there's just like nothing. And then
Mm.
me and my buddies are like, well, I guess that's it. I guess it's time to pack it up and go back to camp. And um, I don't know what could have been going that fast, but you talk about historical places for UFO sightings. Mount St. Helens has a lot of historical precedents for UFO sightings too. So it's,
That and Murray Island
yep,
with the father and the son and their dog with the they call slag,
yep,
dropping off from the ship that was supposedly malfunctioning. I'm you know that story for
yep.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that Murray Island is really interesting. And some of um like they got some sort of the wreckage, or some of the slag or something was being transported,
Hmm.
and the plane transporting it went down by Mount St. Helens. And supposedly that plane you can hike to its uh wreck or whatever. It's probably all cleaned up, but
Well, I'm curious about the Murray Island, see if there's any quote any of that stuff still out there. Who knows? I have no idea. Just like, people go to Roswell where they suppose the crash happens, if there's any debris. I know they've done TV shows trying to find it, and they've had, it's almost like trying to get some gold in the river and hopefully get lucky. I mean, who knows? Who knows? I mean, I don't think that. I mean, I could be wrong unless they really cleaned it up
yeah,
that well, or we just I don't know. I have no idea, but it is. There's a lot of. I mean, you wrote a book about it. There's a lot of mystery. There's a lot of history regarding the Pacific Northwest, and both in the lore, in the mystics of Sasquatch, other things. I'm sure Wendigo, but even UFOs as well. That's what drew me up to moving to Washington years back. So.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, and some people do too. You're talking about that child's voice. Some people will say that that's a Wendigo. That's a Wendigo
Yeah.
thing to draw people into that. And you know, I was thinking about trying to write a story about Wendigo, and I talked to you about this too.
Mm.
It is a fine line between sharing lore and then you know uh making people not respecting people's history and their
Right. It,
experiences. And I mean that I find those really interesting, and I find the fact that Washington has so many serial killers. I think that there's
oh,
a correlation between the
yeah.
amount of serial killers we have here in Washington and the Wendigo lore. And like I said, I want to like write a story exploring that, but I feel like it might be insensitive to the victims' families of those serial
Yeah. No, and dude, you know what? I'm interested in that theory too. I got to be honest because it's not it. I know what you're saying. Your intent is to explore the possible theories, right?
Yes.
Like what that is, Wendigo-ish, demonic, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And that I had never thought about that. That's a really, really good point. Here's an example. My brother and I, we were, he would go on the podcast with me a couple of times. I was doing some research on Aleister Crowley. I'm sure you know who that is. And when I was doing it and doing the research, I know a lot about it, but I was creating a pretty good storyline. I didn't feel right about it.
Yeah.
And he just kind of, and one day he called me and you talk about like synchronicity, right? You talk about this
Yeah.
connection. One day he called me a day or two later because I was really kind of battling with it. And he said, you know what? I don't feel right about talking about it. And I was like, you know what? I agree with you. And I kind of asked him why. He's like, you know what? It's just a platform I don't want to put to potentially give praise to in that
Yeah.
way. In that way, I'm not saying that's what your intent is, but I understand that struggle where it's like I want to share some truth and everything. I want to share some insight, but it's like, okay, where's that line, that type of thing. Like like I said, I think your thought regarding the Wendigo connection with serial killers is a very intriguing thought process because you hear about the Wendigo and how they're pretty much shapeshifters, right?
Yes.
And but is there more to that of a spiritual element
Yeah.
that maybe kind of in that or a possession per se? But anyways, yeah.
Well, and a lot of the lore, the Native American lore are, these skinwalkers and all these other things. Like you said, they're essentially people that sort of get these abilities and use them for nefarious reasons. And especially the Wendigo too. The Wendigo is it used to be like a person in a lot of the lore, and then it basically becomes a cannibal. So like there is a lot of like cannibalistic serial killers too. And some of the people that survive encounters with
Hmm.
them talk about
Hmm.
them having contorted faces and like
Hmm.
superhuman strength. And I mean
Hmm.
there's a lot of correlation between the description of a Wendigo and some of the descriptions of the people that have survived these serial killers. And then you also think about how could they, the Green River Killer, how
Right.
could he kill so many people and get away with it? And it's almost like there's some supernatural ability there that he was tapping, demonic ability, supernatural ability that he was. But anyways, yeah, I've struggled, the other story, the local story I really like that, and I mentioned this in our pre-interview. I wanted to write 5 volumes
Right.
about, and right now I've been kind of picking low-hanging fruit. But we have a lot of vampire lore too. And it was made famous.
Really?
It was made famous, in Twilight, of
I
course,
was saying,
everybody knows.
do they sparkle and then they're
Yeah,
broody?
right. But I mean, even before that movie of Twilight,
Yeah.
that was common lore. And
Well,
some of the,
hold on. Was this in Port Angeles type of thing when you were kind of growing up in a way too?
I mean, yeah, Port Angeles, but also
Because
there's some like
they did some
Aberdeen.
filming there. They did some filming in that area too.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
And so it was well known, like well before Twilight was a thing, there was local lore about vampires.
Oh,
And
I'm
I mean,
so open for that, man. Yeah.
in Aberdeen too. In Aberdeen is a lot of lore about vampires.
Uh-huh.
And there is a lot of missing people that go missing out of those towns where it's cloudy a lot. And I mean, it was always, oh, vampires. If you're out at night wandering around, vampires can get. It was like a common thing, and like it was weird when they made Twilight because that was such like a local thing,
Right.
and then Twilight got made, and now it's a hip cool thing. But that was something that was a local legend that we had. And like I said, whenever you see, you go to these small towns and you look at how many missing people signs there were, like that was always, when we were in the 80s and the 90s, we're like, hey, those were like vampire victims, essentially. So
You know what? I'm one or two. That is interesting. And dude, you know what? We would in the future when if you do more research now, I'd love to do a video on that one too. That'd be a good one to kind of tie into the whole, hey, the Twilight, the truth and the legends behind,
yeah,
like that I think that'll be interesting because that could definitely kind of like, everything's inspired by there's always some type of kernel of truth,
yeah.
right? And I mean, you look at movies and everything, and there's some type of inspiration. There's always some type of agenda. That's my opinion.
I mean, but I always get worried too. Same thing with the serial killers, though. I don't want to like be insensitive to like the like families of these like missing people. So
Right.
I'm trying to like figure out a way to toe that line. I'll say too, there is some historical, I read a lot. So, there was a early explorer expedition that landed on the coast
Mhm.
and had a encounter with a unknown tribe that basically slaughtered them all and then supposedly cannibalized them or ate them. They never recovered the bodies. Suppose
Right.
in the local tribes, and it's right above. I want to say like in between the Quinault tribe and like Nia Bay.
Mhm.
The Quinault tribe and the Macaws so had a lore about a tribe of cannibals that lived in that area.
Hmm.
And so, some people think that, it might be Sasquatch lore, but the tribes knew what Sasquatch was.
Right.
And this was something different. This was a tribe of cannibals that essentially preyed on humans, and the other tribes didn't interact with this cannibalistic tribe. And like I said, so there is some historical precedence for uh
Well, and you know what too? I was what we were talking about that, and maybe this will help that approach. It's not trying to sympathize with these killers, right?
yeah,
And I'm sure the families that have, it's horrific what they did. And even hearing some of these stories of these serial killers, they don't quite understand it. I mean, and it's not to sympathize. I'm not trying to say that, oh, poor them. That's not what it's about. We still all have a choice. We all have will those you know we're reasonable beings, even though look at a world, it is what it is. But I think it's interesting to explore, what if there's a spiritual element? What if there's and excuse the idea, a theory of a ritual behind it, right?
Yeah.
What if there's a ritual behind it that we don't know about, that's carried over? I'm not saying trying to create conspiracy that that it's some tribe that's creating some ritual. I'm not talking about that. I'm just wondering if because of the bloodshed that's happened over the centuries
Yeah.
from everything that
Well, I mean,
type of
Jeffrey Dahmer definitely believed in it, and
oh
I
yeah,
mean, and Jeffrey Dahmer was active in our area, and I mean, well-known Satanist, and
yeah,
supposedly some of the mountains around here, and again, talk about local lore. Some of the mountains by the Seattle area, you can still go and find some of these ritual sites where you would do these blood rituals, and
Well, you talk about intent, right? It's a very powerful thing, and you look at the history and think, how do we not know that intent is still there? How do we not know that veil is still there? Because these things, whatever you want to call them, draw that energy, and it still is there when we have those interests. I mean, it's almost like it's like going on a safari, right? Hey, it's cool to
Mhm.
look at the hey, look at the animals, but
Yeah.
be prepared, protect yourself.
Yes.
Don't go out and say, "Oh, I'm gonna walk out and see a bunch of lions,"
Yeah.
and get close and try to take a picture.
Yep.
Have some contingency plans behind it.
Yep.
Whatever that looks like. I don't have the answers to it. I'm not going to pretend to, but I think that's the important thing too. And that's something we all don't understand, because there's that veil. We're in this physical realm, right? And I
Yes.
think you make a good point. Is that and correct me wrong, I feel like with our technology, listen, I love the phones that we have, I love what we can do here, but there's times that me it's like, man, I think we've gotten so desensitized with technology that we've ignored what's going on out behind our backyard, what's going on that we have around here. And like, even like what I was telling you, like me, it's like, oh well, I'm in Hansville, Port Gamble ain't that big, I need to go somewhere a lot more farther away and reclusive to search what I'm looking for. And then when I go just even on that hike to Port Gamble, I'm like, dude, this is behind me. I did a hike in Hansville here recently, and I'm
Mhm.
like, dude, there's things out here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff in North Kitsap. Did you know at Point No Point? Do you know about the shipwreck off Point No Point?
No, but dude,
Oh, you'll
enlighten
have to read
me.
my second book.
Okay.
So I talk about the shipwreck off Point No Point, and there's a memorial buoy out there too. So next time you're at Point No Point, look for the buoy. That shipwreck, highly suspicious, a lot of weird stuff going on. But also there is Native American petroglyphs along the beach. If you go to Point No Point and you walk to the right, and I've never found them, but
Okay.
supposedly they're on the cliff or a rock or something. And I found some at Agate Pass. There's a petroglyph rock on the other side of uh, Agate Pass on Bainbridge Island, like right
Okay.
by the bridge.
Right.
But I mean, it's been a sacred area. Uh, the local tribes used to battle the heck out of tribes for Kitsap. So it
Right.
was a sacred place. It was a powerful place. A battleground park. They'd have a lot of battles there because this was a sacred, powerful land that they would defend
Mhm.
against all comers. So there is a lot of powerful energy here locally. A lot of strange things too. Uh, you know, and I'll talk forever. I don't know. Like maybe we should set a time here, like 10 more
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Uh,
we'll put 10 more minutes, but you've given me some great inspirational ideas for our next episode, and yeah, some great discussion points, man. And I think you're gonna like what I'm gonna I'll talk about offline really quick when we're done. So
yeah, and I mean it's so much weird stuff, and I want to say this too. Wherever there is like and I don't know, for a lack of a better name, I like to call them like places of power.
Right.
when I'm writing about them.
Yeah.
Um, there is a lot of military activity
Yeah.
wherever there's these places of power. And we have our big bases, but then also we have all of these almost random spots that
Mhm.
the Navy owns or this or that owns that is just fenced off. And who.
I rode up to Port Ludlow, man.
Yeah,
Where that Indian military ammunition stuff's at, dude. That
yep,
was hated like Fort Knox, dude. Anyways, go
that
ahead.
Indian Island.
Yeah.
It, and weird thing about Indian Island, and I wrote about this in my third book that's not out yet. And so
Oh,
Indian Island had a lot of weird sea monster reports in
wow.
that area. A
Wow.
lot of like historically weird sea, and then they build a base there. Like, seems like a weird place to build a base. And
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know it's
I think there's I think personally that there's some type of paranormal research. I mean, look at Skinwalker Ranch, right? And all this
yeah.
stuff. There was some heavy research with that. That I think it's off the records, Black Book. I think a side note here, you should watch on YouTube called Sir No Face if you haven't heard about that. I
Uh-uh.
think that's an interesting one that has to do with the Australian government hiring a paranormal research team, but there's more to the story that I think you'll find fascinating. And honestly, you'll find it fascinating. But I do think there's some type of parallel between that. And who knows if that has to do with if it's if it is spiritual, if it's just another veil to a dimension per se, a lot of people talk about that. I kind of think like, and again, I'm not a scientist, but I think that science and spirituality do go hand in hand. If energy cannot be created nor destroyed, just because in our physical bodies doesn't mean we can't cross another plane per se,
Yeah.
and that's my simplistic thought about that. But anyways, sorry.
Well, and we know from declassified stuff during the Cold War, they were messing around with a lot of experiments, but
Mm.
they're probably what we know and what was really going on is probably 100 times more.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, I would suspect that a lot of military bases are connected with other military bases underground. I wouldn't think that that's a stretch. And I was talking earlier about Sasquatch probably lives in caves. I think that maybe they have some sort of interaction with them in these areas, and they do not want you in those areas. And it's you talk about even on the other side of the Hood Canal Bridge, like on the Olympic Peninsula side, there's a whole huge swath of land that the Navy owns out there and does nothing with. They just have it fenced off. Nobody can go there.
Mm.
And it's like why is this giant piece of property out here just sitting? But even on our side too, like I said, you drive around Gold Mountain. I write about it in my book. When I was a deal when I got out of the Navy as DOD for a while, and we'd have to go check just kind of like random bunkers in the middle of the wood. It's like why are these what is in these bunkers? And that's just what I knew about. What type of stuff does the next clearance know about in the next clearance, and uh so on and so forth. Have you heard of the local cryptid shrimpy?
No, I haven't. No.
So shrimp
Why do you think I have you
shrimpy,
here on this channel, man, talking?
yeah. So shrimpy's a Bremerton cryptid, and it's a giant shrimp that was spotted in like the 1950s. And when we get it done here, you'll have to Google
Okay.
shrimpy.
Okay.
And if I do publish the third book, I do write about shrimpy and a lot of speculation, but it's like um just like a weird creature to be reported. And it's like, is this part of some sort of like weird experiment or whatever? And you're talking about portals and experimenting with portals. and I even write about it in my man, is it my first book or second book? Messing around up there on Gold Mountain. I've seen some of their like top secret trains
Mm.
that run on those tracks carrying huge portal-like structures. And now,
Whoa.
in my videos, people are like, "Oh, well, that's going to a submarine, blah blah blah." Maybe it is going to a submarine, but it's like, why would you, be transporting them through the mountains on secret train cars with secret bases in the mountains? Like, you don't know where that is
Right.
is going.
Right.
And
No, no, exactly. Jeez, dude.
I
Wow.
don't know.
Well, what we'll do, gosh, dude. All right, we're gonna have to do a part two series because it's not like we're an hour and a half, dude. This is
Yeah.
good stuff. And so the person before we wrap up, the person I'm riding with tomorrow is gonna be in my another interview, maybe in a week or two. I gotta get you guys connected. He's local in Suquamish.
Hmm.
I think you'll find his stories fascinating. I met with him at a burger joint last Saturday, and just hearing you talk and him talk, he's got some great stories on a lot of local stuff too. I think you guys would just feed off each other. And so I'll be right with tomorrow. I'm going to talk to him and talk about you because I think you guys. I feel like I play Cupid with people when it comes to stuff.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm all about community. I'm all about connection. I'm all about like finding the truth in a way. And because it's how about this? It's not just about finding the truth. It's making sure that that the truth is not controlled by a narrative.
Yeah.
Right. And so yeah, I'm gonna talk to him tomorrow because he's the guy that's gonna ride with me to Port Townsend. I'm sure he's gonna show me some stuff out there too. But I
Okay.
think you get a lot of inspiration. I think you guys love feed each other if that's cool with you.
Yeah,
Um,
man, we'll have to
yeah.
connect. And like you said, summer, I'm pretty open.
Well, you're a
Uh,
teacher. You better be open, dude.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd highly recommend checking out that Tamawanu's Rock. That is uh an amazing, interesting place. It's right on the way. I
Nice.
think if you guys find it, you won't even you'll be like, why is this here? Like,
Okay.
you
Okay.
will be
I'll
shocked.
I'll talk about tomorrow because I gotta actually message him tonight. Like, hey, we're gonna meet at, so this would be a great spot to go. He might be like, oh, that's where I was taking you, and I'm gonna say, Jacob, dude, there's another secret you see, bro. This is creepy. You gotta stop it. Um, but yeah, what we'll do is when do you get up? When does school stop for you?
School gets done in June. I mean, I do have not any weekend in April, but we could probably try to get a weekend in May
Okay.
and meet up. I mean, I think that the Port Gamble, checking out that might be,
I think that'll be awesome, and then
um,
I'd be like to bringing this guy with me too, for you guys to connect, and I'll talk to more of that offline. Um, what was I gonna say? Okay, last question here. It's not about this stuff. Do you ride a
mhm.
motorcycle?
I don't know.
Okay, go get one. You got a month and a half, dude. No.
It's funny. That's one of my neighbors was just pressing me about getting a motorcycle. And I have a wide variety of interests. I was like watching some YouTube videos on like biker culture.
Yeah,
and
it's fun, man.
and my kids are like, "Dad, are you gonna get a motorcycle?" I'm like, "Nah, I ain't gonna get a motorcycle." Um, you know, one thing about me, Chris, is uh I am notoriously clumsy. So that does
So,
kind of like concern me about like the motorcycle and like,
dude, trust me. If I can ride one, you can ride one because I am that bad too. Trust me. Listen, I'm trying to start a paranormal biker club. Okay, that's the intent. So we
yeah, what's
call
funny
ourselves
though?
the
I
Wendigos. How about that?
I know, right? The
Yeah.
Wendigo
Yeah.
snack. Um, there might already be a paranormal biker group.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think one of my friends told me about that. When I see him at work, I'll ask him about
Okay.
it, and then I'll let you know. Maybe you reach out and you interview a paranormal biker, but I thought he told me that.
Okay. Oh God, that's awesome. Well, I'm all about the connections, and like I said, not like I said when I created this podcast, the platforms for everybody worldwide, countrywide. But especially locally, I find, and I know you know this because you wrote multiple books that you're telling about this, is that there were so much stories and legends out here that people don't talk
Yeah,
about, and I it's either they just want to keep it a secret or they're afraid, and I think people should have a voice to hear it out. And that's like when I was telling people, like, I've had people ask me, well, do you always believe them and so forth? I'm like, I believe in possibilities always.
yeah,
Just because it may not be, it may sound fantastical, doesn't mean the experience is not real. It just hasn't
yeah.
been explained, is how I look at that.
And humans are interesting uh beings ourselves.
Right.
And we create our own realities, right?
I agree.
So, people, skeptics will be like, well, I'm out in the woods all the time and I never have any experiences.
Right.
If your mind is not open to these experiences, I don't know that you're going to have them, or you're going to explain them away, or whatever. Your mind has to be open to the possibility that there's more going on than what is being fed to us on the news, or uh whatever. And our ancestors believed it. And it's people are like, oh, well, they were just superstitious, blah blah blah. Were they, or were they more connected and less plugged in? Were they more connected with the reality and less plugged in with all these distractions that we have
Well,
today?
look at the pyramids, look at the structures that we have that we still can't even figure out. I mean,
Yeah,
I think that's a very good, easy example, but I agree with you. Yeah,
yeah.
100%. 100%. And
All right, brother.
yeah.
Well, I'm gonna let you go.
Oh, before you go, dude, how can people get your book? How can
Oh,
people do that? I want to make sure we get that going for you. Please tell us
yes.
how do you get this book, man? The
Okay.
stories, the legends, the facts, the awesomeness. Go for it.
Okay. So, I mean, it's available a couple places locally. It's in Bremerton at Ballast Books. It's at the museum there in Bremerton. In Port Orchard at pretty much any bookstore in Port Orchard has volume one and volume two. More commercially, it is available at Barnes and Noble. Usually they only stock volume one, which when I got it in Barnes and Noble, I thought I hit the big time.
Yeah.
But they don't order that much. It was available in the bookstore in Poulsbo. What's that? Liberty Bay.
Yes. Uh-huh.
They Liberty Bay did stock it. I don't know. They wouldn't buy wholesale from me, so they bought from wholesale online. I don't know if they're actively, if you guys go in there and ask them, I'm sure they'll order it for you. And then, available on Amazon, which me and you talked about. I
Yeah.
like to support local business, but at some point you have to get your Amazon sales up if you're ever going to investigate full time, right?
Hey, how I look at it, you put Amazon, people love the book
Yep.
worldwide, countrywide. Guess what? More business here in Kitsap,
Yep.
guys. You got to look at the bigger picture. I know
Yep.
this. I'm a business guy. So, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so Hood's, I go down south a lot. So Hood Sport is available at the Union Market. So the Union Market carries it down in Union, and Hood Canal Gifts and Hood Sport Stocks and Bulletin. I'll actually be down there tomorrow, so
Okay.
they'll probably have some new books down there. So if you guys are down south, uh, Hood Canal Adventure. I have a lot of stuff. So Hood Canal Adventure shout out in Brennan, Washington. They stock it. Um, and there's a little gas station by Hamma that stocks. So
This is
it's out
awesome.
there.
I love it, man. I love
It's
it. All right. Before I end the show, stay online
okay.
really quick for 2 seconds before you get off,
Okay.
because I know you got you and your kids. Everybody, please check out his book, Northwestern Mythology.
Yeah, Northwest Mythology.
Doggone it!
And
Again, I
Northwest
gotta
is
admit,
one word.
North.
Northwest, two words was taken. So that's
Oh,
Northwest, one word.
sorry, Northwest Mythology. I apologize. I had
Yes.
four concussions
Volume one
in so
and volume
long.
two.
I was dropped it on my head by my mama. I think she smoked a little ganja when she was pregnant with me. I'm working on it. Northwest Mythology, please get the book. Everybody, Bound the Truth 34@gmail.com for any questions. Please subscribe on Spotify. Everybody, have a great night. I'll talk to you offline a little bit, Jacob.
All right.